Marcus Tank Williams stands on the courthouse steps, his military bearing unchanged despite the blood on his knuckles and the federal agents surrounding him. The microphones thrust toward his face capture his final words. "They thought breaking my daughter would break me. They were wrong." Behind him, the building burns as sirens wail through downtown Atlanta. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below, and if you believe in fighting for justice no matter the cost, hit that like button and subscribe, because tomorrow's episode reveals the shocking truth that started it all. But how did a decorated Navy SEAL end up here, and what really happened to his 17-year-old daughter that night? 3 months before Marcus Williams would stand bloodied on those courthouse steps, he was teaching his daughter the most important lesson of her life. The irony wouldn't hit him until much later. "Remember, Zara, awareness is everything," Marcus said, adjusting the rearview mirror in their driveway. His calloused hands, scarred from 20 years of Navy SEAL operations, gently guided her smaller ones on the steering wheel. "Always know what's happening around you." 17-year-old Zara Williams rolled her eyes with the confidence only a teenager could possess. "Dad, I've been driving for a year. I think I know how to handle a car." Marcus studied his daughter's face, seeing so much of himself in her determined expression. At 5'7", with her mother's graceful features and his stubborn jawline, Zara commanded attention wherever she went. Honor roll student, track team captain, destined for Stanford or MIT. She was everything he and Keisha had dreamed their child could become. It's not about handling the car, baby girl. It's about reading people, reading situations, knowing when something feels wrong. Zara's expression softened. She understood her father's protective instincts came from a place of love, even when they felt suffocating. "Like your spider sense," Marcus chuckled. During his deployments in Afghanistan and Iraq, his teammates had nicknamed his intuition Spider Sense, after he'd prevented 3 ambushes by sensing something wasn't right. Exactly like that. They practiced defensive maneuvers for another 30 minutes before heading inside their 2-story colonial home in Meadowbrook, one of Atlanta's most affluent suburbs. The neighborhood was a testament to the American dream, with manicured lawns and luxury cars in every driveway. The Williams family was one of only 3 black families among the 200 homes, a fact that never escaped Marcus's notice. "Smells incredible in here," Marcus called out as they entered through the garage. Dr. Keisha Williams emerged from the kitchen, still wearing her scrubs from her shift at Atlanta Children's Hospital. At 43, she maintained the same stunning beauty that had captured Marcus's heart during his brief stint at Emory University before enlisting. Her dark skin glowed with pride as she watched her family gather around the dinner table. "Jerk, chicken with rice and peas," she announced, setting down the steaming plates. "And before you ask, yes, I used your grandmother's recipe." Dinner conversation flowed naturally between Zara's college applications, Marcus's latest security consulting contract with a Fortune 500 company, and Keisha's successful surgery on a 6-year-old with a congenital heart defect. This was their routine, their sanctuary. Marcus had built this life brick by brick after leaving the military, determined to give his family the stability he'd never known growing up in inner-city Detroit. "Stanford called today," Zara announced casually, causing both parents to freeze mid-bite. "And?" Keisha prompted. "They want to discuss my application. The track coach thinks I have a real shot at a full scholarship." Marcus felt his chest swell with pride. His daughter was extraordinary, but more than that, she was kind. She tutored struggling students, volunteered at the local animal shelter, and had never let success go to her head. "That's my baby," he said, reaching across to squeeze her hand. "Your grandfather would be so proud." Zara's grandfather, Marcus's father, had been a janitor who worked 3 jobs to keep his family afloat. He died when Marcus was 15, but not before instilling in his son the values of hard work, integrity, and protecting family above all else. After dinner, Marcus performed his nightly security check. Old habits from 2 decades of military. Service died hard. He tested the alarm system, checked window locks, and reviewed the footage from their discreet security cameras. Meadowbrook was safe, but Marcus knew safety was often an illusion. Living in their neighborhood came with unspoken rules. Be exceptional but not threatening. Succeed but don't make waves. Marcus's military background and security consulting business made him valuable to their neighbors, but he sensed the underlying tension. Some residents still seemed surprised to see a black family in such an affluent area. "You're overthinking again," Keisha said, finding him in his study reviewing camera feeds. "Maybe." Marcus minimized the security software and turned to face his wife. "Did you see the news about that kid in Birmingham? 18 years old, honor student, shot during a traffic stop." Keisha's expression grew serious. She'd seen too many young black men in her emergency room, victims of violence that often went unpunished. "I saw it, but Marcus, we can't live in fear. We've built something beautiful here." "I know, it's just—" Marcus struggled to articulate the constant weight he carried. "Sometimes I feel like we're living in a house of cards. One wrong move, one bad encounter, and everything could collapse. That's why we prepare them," Keisha said, referring to their countless conversations with Zara about interacting with authority figures. "That's why we live our lives with integrity. That's why we chose this neighborhood, this school, these opportunities." Marcus nodded, but the unease persisted. He'd survived firefights in Fallujah and Kandahar, but nothing prepared him for the vulnerability of raising a black child in America. Every parent worried about their children, but his fears were different. They were rooted in centuries of history and daily headlines that reminded him how quickly lives could be destroyed. Later that evening, as they watched the news together, a report about increased police presence in their area caught Marcus's attention. The anchor mentioned several recent incidents of suspicious activity that had prompted additional patrols. Marcus noted that all the incidents seemed to involve black or Hispanic residents. "Can I borrow the car tomorrow night?" Zara asked during a commercial break. "Study group for AP Chemistry. Sarah's parents are out of town, so we're meeting at her house." Marcus's protective instincts flared. "Which car?" "Mom's Mercedes. Mine's still in the shop." Keisha touched Marcus's arm gently. "It's 8 blocks away, baby. She'll be fine." Marcus studied his daughter's face. At 17, Zara possessed a confidence that both thrilled and terrified him. She believed the world was fundamentally fair, that hard work and good character would protect her. He envied that innocence, even as he feared for it. "Okay," he said finally, "but text us when you arrive and when you're leaving. And if anything feels wrong, anything at all, you call me immediately." "Dad, you worry too much," Zara laughed, kissing his cheek. "What's the worst that could happen?" As his family headed upstairs for the night, Marcus remained in his study, staring at the security monitors. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful. Street lamps illuminated empty sidewalks and well-maintained lawns. Everything appeared normal, but something felt wrong. Marcus had learned to trust his instincts during his military career. That same intuition that had saved his life in combat zones was now screaming that danger was approaching his family. He couldn't identify the threat, couldn't point to specific evidence, but the feeling was undeniable. He spent another hour reviewing security footage from the past week, looking for patterns or anomalies. Nothing obvious appeared, but he noticed increased police patrols near their home. Not unusual given the recent incidents, but something about the timing felt deliberate. His phone buzzed with a text from Tommy Rodriguez, his former SEAL teammate who now worked as a private investigator in Atlanta. "Heard there's been some chatter about your neighborhood. Might want to keep your eyes open." Marcus stared at the message, his unease deepening. Tommy's sources were usually reliable, remnants of their shared military network that had transitioned into various law enforcement and security roles. "What kind of chatter?" Marcus replied. "Nothing specific, just word that some folks aren't happy about certain families moving up in the world. You know how it is." Marcus knew exactly how it was. Success made some people uncomfortable, especially when it challenged their assumptions about who deserved to occupy certain spaces. He'd faced it throughout his military career and now in his business dealings. The difference was that now his family was exposed. He locked his study and headed upstairs, finding Keisha already asleep and Zara's room dark. Standing in his daughter's doorway, Marcus watched her peaceful face and made a silent promise. Whatever threats existed in the shadows, he would face them. He'd spent 2 decades protecting his country. Now he would protect what mattered most. But as he lay awake that night, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his worst fears were about to be realized. The life they'd built, the safety they'd cultivated, the future they'd planned for Zara, all of it felt suddenly fragile. He'd been preparing for the wrong battle. All his security measures, all his precautions, assumed threats would come from outside their community. He never imagined the greatest danger would come from those sworn to protect and serve. Tomorrow night, Zara would drive to her study group in her mother's Mercedes SUV. She would follow every rule, every piece of advice her parents had given. Her. And it wouldn't matter, because 8 blocks from their home on a quiet street called Rosewood Avenue, her entire world was about to shatter. 3 months before Marcus Williams would stand bloodied on those courthouse steps, he was teaching his daughter the most important lesson of her life. The irony wouldn't hit him until much later. "Remember, Zara, awareness is everything," Marcus said, adjusting the rearview mirror in their driveway. His calloused hands, scarred from 20 years of Navy SEAL operations, gently guided her smaller ones on the steering wheel. "Always know what's happening around you." 17-year-old Zara Williams rolled her eyes with the confidence only a teenager could possess. "Dad, I've been driving for a year. I think I know how to handle a car." Marcus studied his daughter's face, seeing so much of himself in her determined expression. At 5'7", with her mother's graceful features and his stubborn jawline, Zara commanded attention wherever she went. Honor roll student, track team captain, destined for Stanford or MIT. She was everything he and Keisha had dreamed their child could become. It's not about handling the car, baby girl. It's about reading people, reading situations, knowing when something feels wrong. Zara's expression softened. She understood her father's protective instincts came from a place of love even when they felt suffocating. "Like your spider sense?" Marcus chuckled. During his deployments in Afghanistan and Iraq, his teammates had nicknamed his intuition Spider Sense, after he'd prevented 3 ambushes by sensing something wasn't right. Exactly like that, they practiced defensive maneuvers for another, 30 minutes before heading inside their 2-story colonial home in Meadowbrook, one of Atlanta's most affluent suburbs. The neighborhood was a testament to the American dream, with manicured lawns and luxury cars in every driveway. The Williams family was one of only 3 black families among the 200 homes, a fact that never escaped Marcus's notice. "Smells. Incredible in here," Marcus called out as they entered through the garage. Dr. Keisha Williams emerged from the kitchen, still wearing her scrubs from her shift at Atlanta Children's Hospital. At 43, she maintained the same stunning beauty that had captured Marcus's heart during his brief stint at Emory University before enlisting. Her dark skin glowed with pride as she watched her family gather around the dinner table. "Jerk, chicken with rice and peas," she announced, setting down the steaming plates. "And before you ask, yes, I used your grandmother's recipe." Dinner conversation flowed naturally between Zara's college applications, Marcus's latest security consulting contract with a Fortune 500 company, and Keisha's successful surgery on a 6-year-old with a congenital heart defect. This was their routine, their sanctuary. Marcus had built this life brick by brick after leaving the military, determined to give his family the stability he'd never known growing up in inner-city Detroit. "Stanford called today," Zara announced casually, causing both parents to freeze, mid-bite. "And?" Keisha prompted. "They want to discuss my application. The track coach thinks I have a real shot at a full scholarship." Marcus felt his chest swell with pride. His daughter was extraordinary, but more than that, she was kind. She tutored struggling students, volunteered at the local animal shelter, and had never let success go to her head. "That's my baby," he said, reaching across to squeeze her hand. "Your grandfather would be so proud." Zara's grandfather, Marcus's father, had been a janitor who worked 3 jobs to keep his family afloat. He'd died when Marcus was 15, but not before instilling in his son the values of hard work, integrity, and protecting family above all else. After dinner, Marcus performed his nightly security check. Old habits from 2 decades of military. Service died hard. He tested the alarm system, checked window locks, and reviewed the footage from their discreet security cameras. Meadowbrook was safe, but Marcus knew safety was often an illusion. Living in their neighborhood came with unspoken rules. Be exceptional but not threatening. Succeed, but don't make waves. Marcus's military background and security consulting business made him valuable to their neighbors, but he sensed the underlying tension. Some residents still seemed surprised to see a black family in such an affluent area. "You're overthinking again," Keisha said, finding him in his study reviewing camera feeds. "Maybe." Marcus minimized the security software and turned to face his wife. "Did you see the news about that kid in Birmingham? 18 years old, honor student, shot during a traffic stop." Keisha's expression grew serious. She'd seen too many young black men in her emergency room, victims of violence that often went unpunished. "I saw it. But Marcus, we can't live in fear. We've built something beautiful here. I know, it's just—" Marcus struggled to articulate the constant weight he carried. "Sometimes I feel like we're living in a house of cards. One wrong move, one bad encounter, and everything could collapse." "That's why we prepare them," Keisha said, referring to their countless conversations with Zara about interacting with authority figures. "That's why we live our lives with integrity. That's why we chose this neighborhood, this school, these opportunities." Marcus nodded, but the unease persisted. He'd survived firefights in Fallujah and Kandahar, but nothing prepared him for the vulnerability of raising a black child in America. Every parent worried about their children, but his fears were different. They were rooted in centuries of history and daily headlines that reminded him how quickly lives could be destroyed. Later that evening, as they watched the news together, a report about increased police presence in their area caught Marcus's attention. The anchor mentioned several recent incidents of suspicious activity that had prompted additional patrols. Marcus noted that all the incidents seemed to involve black or Hispanic residents. "Can I borrow the car tomorrow night?" Zara asked during a commercial break. "Study group for AP Chemistry. Sarah's parents are out of town, so we're meeting at her house." Marcus's protective instincts flared. "Which car?" "Mom's Mercedes. Mine's still in the shop." Keisha touched Marcus's arm gently. "It's 8 blocks away, baby. She'll be fine." Marcus studied his daughter's face. At 17, Zara possessed a confidence that both thrilled and terrified him. She believed the world was fundamentally fair, that hard work and good character would protect her. He envied that innocence even as he feared for it. "Okay," he said finally, "but text us when you arrive and when you're leaving. And if anything feels wrong, anything at all, you call me immediately." "Dad, you worry too much," Zara laughed, kissing his cheek. "What's the worst that could happen?" As his family headed upstairs for the night, Marcus remained in his study, staring at the security monitors. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful. Street lamps illuminated empty sidewalks and well-maintained lawns. Everything appeared normal, but something felt wrong. Marcus had learned to trust his instincts during his military career. That same intuition that had saved his life in combat zones was now screaming that danger was approaching his family. He couldn't identify the threat, couldn't point to specific evidence, but the feeling was undeniable. He spent another hour reviewing security footage from the past week, looking for patterns or anomalies. Nothing obvious appeared, but he noticed increased police patrols near their home. Not unusual given the recent incidents, but something about the timing felt deliberate. His phone buzzed with a text from Tommy Rodriguez, his former SEAL teammate who now worked as a private investigator in Atlanta. "Heard there's been some chatter about your neighborhood. Might want to keep your eyes open." Marcus stared at the message, his unease deepening. Tommy's sources were usually reliable, remnants of their shared military network that had transitioned into various law enforcement and security roles. "What kind of chatter?" Marcus replied. "Nothing specific. Just word that some folks aren't happy about certain families moving up in the world. You know how it is." Marcus knew exactly how it was. Success made some people uncomfortable, especially when it challenged their assumptions about who deserved to occupy certain spaces. He'd faced it throughout his military career and now in his business dealings. The difference was that now his family was exposed. He locked his study and headed upstairs, finding Keisha already asleep and Zara's room dark. Standing in his daughter's doorway, Marcus watched her peaceful face and made a silent promise. Whatever threats existed in the shadows, he would face them. He'd spent 2 decades protecting his country. Now, he would protect what mattered most. But, as he lay awake that night, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his worst fears were about to be realized. The life they'd built, the safety they'd cultivated, the future they'd planned for Zara, all of it felt suddenly fragile. He'd been preparing for the wrong battle. All his security measures, all his precautions, assumed threats would come from outside their community. He never imagined the greatest danger would come from those sworn to protect and serve. Tomorrow night, Zara would drive to her study group in her mother's Mercedes SUV. She would follow every rule, every piece of advice her parents had given her. And it wouldn't matter, because 8 blocks from their home on a quiet street called Rosewood Avenue, her entire world was about to shatter. The fluorescent lights of Atlanta General Hospital's emergency room cast harsh shadows across Dr. Elizabeth Hayes's face as she examined Zara Williams. In her 15 years as an emergency physician, she'd seen plenty of assault victims, but this case made her stomach turn. "Honey, I need you to tell me exactly what happened," Dr. Hayes said gently, photographing each injury with methodical precision. Zara's voice was barely a whisper. "The officers said I was speeding, but I wasn't. I'm always careful about my speed." Dr. Hayes documented the dislocated shoulder, the facial lacerations, the chemical burns around Zara's eyes, and the extensive road rash on her arms and legs. Each photograph would become crucial evidence, though she didn't yet know how hard certain people would work to make it disappear. "This is consistent with significant blunt force trauma," Dr. Hayes told Marcus and Keisha privately. "Multiple impact points, defensive wounds on her arms. This wasn't a simple arrest gone wrong, this was a sustained assault." Marcus's jaw tightened. "How long before she recovers?" "Physically, 6 to 8 weeks for the shoulder. The other injuries will heal faster. But psychologically," Dr. Hayes shook her head, "that's going to take much longer." While Zara received treatment, Marcus returned to the Fulton County Police Department. This time he wasn't the panicked father. This time he came prepared with legal documentation and a recording device. Detective Ray Morrison, a 15-year veteran with salt and pepper hair and tired eyes, met Marcus in a sterile interview room that smelled of stale coffee and broken dreams. "Mr. Williams, I understand you want to file a complaint about last night's incident," Morrison said, his tone suggesting he'd rather be anywhere else. "My daughter was brutally assaulted by Officers Kowalski and Reeves during what they claim was a routine traffic stop," Marcus replied, sliding a folder across the table. "I want a full investigation." Morrison barely glanced at the medical photographs. "According to the officer's report, your daughter was non-compliant and became aggressive when asked to step out of the vehicle. She's 17 years old and weighs 120 pounds. Are you telling me 2 grown men couldn't subdue her without hospitalizing her? Sometimes suspects are stronger than they appear. People under the influence can exhibit unusual strength. She wasn't under the influence of anything except allergy medication prescribed by her doctor." Morrison shrugged. "Field tests showed suspicious white powder. Could have been anything." Marcus felt his temper flare but kept his voice level. The bottle was clearly labeled with her prescription information. Labels can be faked. The conversation continued in circles for another 20 minutes, with Morrison deflecting every point Marcus raised. It became clear that this wasn't an investigation. It was a performance designed to waste time and discourage pursuit of justice. "I want to see the security footage from the traffic stop," Marcus said finally. "What footage?" "There are 3 businesses with security cameras facing that intersection, plus dashboard cameras from the patrol cars." Morrison consulted his notes with theatrical slowness. "Looks like there was a technical malfunction with the dashboard cameras, and the business security systems were offline for maintenance." "All of them at the same time? Bad luck, I guess." Marcus stood to leave, recognizing a dead end when he saw one, but Morrison's next words stopped him cold. "Mr. Williams, let me give you some friendly advice. Your daughter made some poor choices last night. Fighting these charges will only make things worse for her. Kids make mistakes. Sometimes it's better to let them face the consequences and learn from them." "My daughter's only mistake was being black in the wrong neighborhood," Marcus replied quietly. Now that's not fair. This department doesn't see color, we just enforce the law. Marcus walked out without another word, but Morrison's dismissive attitude told him everything he needed to know. This wasn't going to be resolved through normal channels. Over the next 72 hours, the cover-up accelerated. The security footage from Henderson's Auto Parts mysteriously corrupted during a routine system update. The convenience store's cameras had been vandalized by unknown subjects the night before the traffic stop. The third business, a dry cleaner, claimed their system had been offline for maintenance, despite the owner privately telling Marcus he'd given the footage to police voluntarily. Meanwhile, witness statements began disappearing from the file. Mrs. Patterson, who lived across from the traffic stop location, told Marcus she'd given a detailed statement about what she witnessed. But when he called Detective Morrison to request a copy, Morrison claimed no such statement existed. Maybe she's confused, Morrison suggested. Elderly people sometimes think they remember things that didn't happen. Mrs. Patterson was 62 and worked as a paralegal for one of Atlanta's most prestigious law firms. Two other witnesses, teenage boys who'd been walking home from basketball practice, suddenly claimed they'd seen nothing unusual. When Marcus spoke to them privately, away from their parents, one whispered that police had visited their homes and strongly suggested their memories might be mistaken. The medical evidence proved more difficult to suppress. Dr. Hayes had followed proper protocols, creating a comprehensive record of Zara's injuries. But even that became problematic when hospital administration called her into a meeting. "We've received some concerns about your examination of the Williams girl," Dr. Robert Chen, the chief of staff, told her. "Some questions about whether your documentation was appropriately objective." Dr. Hayes stared at him in disbelief. "Are you questioning my professional competence?" "Of course not. But we need to be careful not to inject personal bias into medical records, especially in cases involving law enforcement. I documented injuries consistent with severe physical assault. That's not bias, that's medicine. Perhaps. But given the ongoing investigation, we think it would be prudent to have Dr. Martinez conduct a second examination, just to ensure accuracy." Dr. Martinez was known for his conservative approach to documentation and his reluctance to challenge law enforcement narratives. His subsequent examination, conducted 3 days after the assault when bruising had begun to fade, described Zara's injuries as minor abrasions consistent with falling during arrest procedures. The criminal charges against Zara proceeded despite the lack of evidence. Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Walsh, a 10-year veteran prosecutor, met with Marcus and the family's attorney to discuss a plea agreement. "Given your daughter's clean record, we're prepared to offer a very generous deal," Walsh said. "Plead guilty to disorderly conduct, complete 20 hours of community service, and the other charges disappear." "She didn't commit any crimes," Marcus replied. "That's for a jury to decide. But I should warn you, resisting arrest and assault on a police officer are serious charges. If convicted, she could face significant jail time." "What assault? She's the one who was hospitalized." Walsh consulted her file with exaggerated concern. "Officer Reeves suffered a bruised knuckle during the altercation. He may have permanent nerve damage." Marcus nearly laughed at the absurdity, but his lawyer placed a restraining hand on his arm. "We'll need time to consider," the attorney said. Outside the courthouse, Marcus felt the walls closing in. Every institution that should have protected his daughter was instead protecting her attackers. The police, the medical system, the prosecutor's office, all of them working together to bury the truth. That night, the harassment began. Marcus discovered all 4 tires on his BMW slashed when he left his office. Security cameras at his building had mysteriously malfunctioned during the time window when the vandalism occurred. Keisha found her car keyed in the hospital parking garage with N-word lover scratched into the paint. Hospital security claimed their cameras had been offline for maintenance. Graffiti appeared on their home's front door, "Keep your mouth shut or else." The neighborhood security patrol, which cost the Homeowners Association $30,000 annually, had somehow missed the vandals. Marcus's business began receiving anonymous complaints to the state licensing board, claiming he was mentally unstable and possibly dangerous. His corporate clients started receiving similar warnings about his erratic behavior and history of violence. The message was clear: pursue justice for Zara and lose everything. But Marcus had faced worse odds in Fallujah and Kandahar. The difference was that in war zones, he'd always known who the enemy was. Here the enemy wore badges and carried the authority of the state. Late one night, as he sat in his study reviewing the case files for the 100th time, Marcus's phone rang. The caller ID showed unknown. "Mr. Williams?" The voice was elderly, female, nervous. "This is Mrs. Patterson. I can't talk long, but I wanted you to know I didn't change my statement voluntarily." "What do you mean?" "Two officers came to my house yesterday. They said if I testified about what I saw, they'd have to investigate my grandson, Marcus. Said they'd been watching him, thought he might be involved with drugs." Marcus felt his blood pressure spike. "Is your grandson involved with drugs?" "He's 8 years old, Mr. Williams. He's in 3rd grade. The line went quiet as the implication sank in. "They threatened a child to silence you. I'm sorry, I want to help, but I can't risk my grandson." Mrs. Patterson hung up, leaving Marcus staring at his phone in disbelief. These weren't just corrupt cops covering their mistakes. This was organized, systematic intimidation designed to protect something much larger than two officers' careers. Marcus walked to his basement and opened a locked storage room that Keisha and Zara weren't allowed to enter. Inside were items from his military service, communications equipment, surveillance gear, and other tools he'd hoped never to use again. His hands moved automatically, muscle memory taking over as he assembled a digital investigation kit. If the system wouldn't give him justice through legal channels, he'd find another way. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop digging or your family suffers more than they already have." Marcus smiled for the first time since Zara's assault. Threats meant he was getting close to something important. In his experience, people only threatened those they feared. And after 20 years as a Navy SEAL, Marcus Williams was very good at being frightening. He typed a response: "Come and try." But as he began planning his investigation, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something crucial. The efficiency of the cover-up, the coordination between different agencies, the professional intimidation tactics, all of it suggested this wasn't Kowalski and Reeves acting alone. Someone with real power was protecting them. Someone who could make evidence disappear, witnesses recant, and institutions cooperate. Someone who saw the Williams family not as victims deserving justice, but as threats requiring elimination. Comment number 1 if you think Marcus should trust the legal system to eventually deliver justice, or comment number 2 if you believe he was right to start his own investigation. Hit that like button if you've ever felt like the system failed someone you cared about. And don't forget to subscribe, because what Marcus discovers next will shock you. But who was really behind this cover-up, and how far were they willing to go to protect their secrets? Marcus Williams's basement transformation began at 3 a.m., 3 days after the threatening text message. Using skills honed during 20 years of military intelligence gathering, he converted the space into an operations center that would have impressed his former SEAL teammates. Wall-mounted monitors displayed digital maps of Atlanta, with color-coded pins marking incident locations. Whiteboards covered in photographs, timeline charts, and connection diagrams filled every available surface. Communications equipment, surveillance cameras, and recording devices turned the basement into a high-tech nerve center. The first person Marcus called was Tommy "Ghost" Rodriguez, his former teammate who'd earned his nickname by appearing and disappearing without a trace during covert operations. Now working as a private investigator in Atlanta, Tommy possessed connections throughout law enforcement that remained from their shared military network. "I heard about Zara," Tommy said, embracing his old friend in the basement command center. "This is some serious setup you've got here." "I need to know what really happened that night," Marcus replied, "and I need to know who's protecting Kowalski and Reeves." Tommy's expression grew serious as he reviewed the case files Marcus had compiled. "Brother, this goes deeper than you think. I've been hearing whispers about these two for months." "What kind of whispers?" "Word is they're involved in at least a dozen similar incidents over the past 3 years. All Black or Hispanic victims, all covered up, all forgotten." Marcus felt his stomach drop. Zara wasn't random. Nothing about this was random. These guys are hunting. Their investigation began with social media infiltration. Using fake profiles and advanced search techniques, Marcus and Tommy penetrated closed police Facebook groups and private chat forums. What they discovered sickened them. Both Officer Bradley Kowalski's online presence revealed connections to white supremacist organizations. His private posts contained racial slurs, violent fantasies about teaching lessons to minorities who forgot their place, and photographs from rallies that featured Confederate flags and Nazi symbols. Officer Danny Reeves's accounts showed similar content, along with detailed discussions about targeting uppity black families in affluent neighborhoods. One post, dated 2 weeks before Zara's assault, specifically mentioned the Meadowbrook area. "These aren't cops," Tommy said, printing screenshots of the evidence. "These are terrorists with badges." The pattern became clear as they expanded their investigation. Every victim had been successful, educated, living in predominantly white neighborhoods. Every incident had been labeled as resisting arrest or non-compliance. Every case had been buried by the same network of corrupt officials. Marcus's military contacts provided additional resources. Former intelligence officers, now working in corporate security, shared surveillance techniques and digital forensics tools. The investigation expanded beyond what any civilian effort should have been capable of achieving. 2 weeks into their underground operation, Marcus received an unexpected call from Father Michael Okafor, a Nigerian-born priest who led St. Augustine's Catholic Church in downtown Atlanta. "Mr. Williams, I've been following your daughter's case in the news," Father Okafor said during their meeting in his church office. "I believe you should speak with some of my parishioners." Over the next several hours, Marcus met with 7 families who'd suffered similar attacks over the past 3 years. All were black. All were financially successful. All had been targeted. During routine traffic stops or wellness checks that escalated into violence. The Johnsons, a family of 4, had been harassed for 6 months after moving into an expensive suburb. Their teenage son was arrested for loitering in his own driveway. The charges were dropped, but only after they'd spent $12,000 on legal fees. The Washingtons faced constant police attention after Mrs. Washington was promoted to vice president at a major bank. Their daughter was stopped walking to school 3 times in 1 week, each time questioned about suspicious activity in the neighborhood, where she'd lived for 8 years. The pattern was unmistakable: systematic harassment designed to drive successful black families out of certain areas. "They're trying to control who gets to live where," Father Okafor explained. "Economic apartheid disguised as law enforcement." Marcus's investigation took a dangerous turn when he decided to infiltrate police communications directly. Using equipment acquired through military channels, he began monitoring radio traffic and digital communications between officers. What he discovered shocked even his hardened sensibilities. There was a systematic operation targeting minority families who achieved success in traditionally white spaces. Code names, operational plans, and coordination between multiple precincts revealed an organized conspiracy that extended far beyond individual racism. Operation Cleanup was designed to maintain neighborhood character through selective enforcement and intimidation. Marcus found references to target lists, surveillance schedules, and coordination with unidentified civilian groups. The evidence was overwhelming, but also dangerous. These weren't rogue officers acting independently. This was an organized network with resources, planning, and political protection. The retaliation began almost immediately. Marcus's home security system detected 3 separate break-in attempts over a 2-week period. Each was sophisticated, professional, clearly conducted by people with law enforcement or military training. Only Marcus's extensive countermeasures and combat experience prevented successful intrusions. Dr. Keisha Williams found herself under investigation at the hospital for unprofessional conduct and possible substance abuse. Anonymous complaints alleged she'd been drinking before surgery and showing signs of mental instability. Her department chief, Dr. Robert Chen, called her into his office with barely concealed hostility. "These allegations are serious, Keisha," We'll need you to submit to immediate drug testing and psychological evaluation. This is harassment, Keisha replied. You know these charges are false. I don't know anything except what's in these reports. And they suggest you're not fit for surgical duties. Zara faced similar treatment at school. Guidance counselor Mrs. Bradley, who'd known Zara for 3 years, suddenly filed reports claiming the teenager was exhibiting concerning behavioral changes and possible signs of drug use. Social services received anonymous tips about neglect and abuse in the Williams household. Marcus's security consulting business suffered mysterious cancellations. Corporate clients received anonymous letters claiming he was mentally unstable and potentially dangerous. 3 major contracts worth over $200,000 were terminated within a week. The message was clear: drop the investigation or lose everything. But Marcus had faced worse odds in combat zones. The difference was that now he was fighting for his family's survival, not just completing a mission. His breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Late one night, his secure phone rang with a call from a blocked number. Mr. Williams? The voice was male, nervous, clearly using some kind of voice distortion technology. I'm calling because what happened to your daughter is wrong. Who is this? Someone who works in the system. Someone who's seen too much and stayed quiet too long. Why are you calling me? Because I have information you need about who's really behind this. The anonymous caller, who identified himself only as Blue, provided inside intelligence about the conspiracy. He confirmed Marcus's suspicions about organized targeting and revealed that the operation extended to federal-level protection. Kowalski and Reeves are foot soldiers, Blue explained. The real power is higher up. People who can make evidence disappear and witnesses recant. How high up? High enough to coordinate with state politicians and federal law enforcement. High enough to have your family disappeared if they decide you're too dangerous. Blue provided meeting locations, surveillance schedules, and internal communications that proved the conspiracy reached into the FBI's Atlanta field office. Certain agents were actively suppressing civil rights investigations to protect the network. Why are you helping me? Marcus asked during one of their clandestine meetings. Because I became a cop to protect people. What these bastards are doing isn't law enforcement. It's terrorism. With Blue's intelligence, Marcus and Tommy mapped the entire network. It included dozens of officers across multiple precincts, several prosecutors, at least 2 federal agents, and a state senator who'd received campaign contributions from groups connected to the operation. The evidence was overwhelming, but Marcus realized he needed federal intervention to have any hope of justice. The local system was too compromised to be trusted. His opportunity came when Tommy was attacked. 3 men in ski masks cornered Tommy outside his apartment, beating him with baseball bats until he required hospitalization. The message spray, painted on his car, was unambiguous: stop or die. But Tommy had been recording his attackers with a hidden camera. The footage clearly showed one attacker's police academy ring and another's distinctive tattoo that Marcus recognized from Kowalski's social media posts. That's it, Marcus said, standing over Tommy's hospital bed. We're going federal. Agent Lisa Park of the FBI's Civil Rights Division initially seemed skeptical when Marcus requested a meeting, but her expression changed as he laid out the evidence his investigation had compiled. Mr. Williams, if even half of what you're alleging is true, this represents one of the largest civil rights conspiracies we've encountered. It's all true, and I can prove it. The formal federal investigation began 48 hours later. The FBI's involvement triggered an immediate and vicious response from the conspiracy Marcus had exposed. What followed was 2 weeks of escalating warfare that transformed the Williams family from victims seeking justice into targets fighting for survival. It began with a break-in attempt that showed the desperation of their enemies. Marcus's military-grade security system detected the intrusion at 2:17 a.m. 3 figures in tactical gear attempted to breach the house through the basement, believing they could access Marcus's evidence room undetected. They were wrong. Marcus had anticipated exactly this scenario. Motion sensors triggered silent alarms throughout the house, while locking down the basement with steel barriers that required specialized equipment to breach. The intruders found themselves trapped in a kill zone of Marcus's design. "Keisha, take Zara to the safe room," Marcus whispered, his voice deadly calm as he retrieved weapons from a hidden compartment. "Call the number Agent Park gave us." The confrontation lasted 8 minutes. 3 trained operatives against 1 Navy SEAL fighting to protect his family. When police finally arrived, they found 2 attackers unconscious and zip-tied in the sea basement, while the third had fled through a window, leaving behind blood and tactical equipment. But the most shocking discovery came when Marcus removed their masks. 2 of the attackers were off-duty Atlanta police officers. Agent Park arrived. 30 minutes later, her expression grim as she surveyed the scene. "This changes everything, Mr. Williams. They're not even trying to hide their involvement anymore." "Because they're desperate," Marcus replied. "We're close to something that terrifies them." The federal investigation accelerated dramatically. FBI raids hit 3 police precincts simultaneously, seizing communications equipment, personnel files, and financial records. The scope of evidence overwhelmed even Agent Park's experienced team. "We're looking at RICO violations, civil rights, conspiracies, and possible federal corruption," she told Marcus during a briefing at the FBI field office. "This goes beyond anything we initially imagined." But the conspiracy's response was swift and brutal. Dr. Keisha Williams arrived at Atlanta Children's Hospital to find security guards escorting her to an emergency disciplinary hearing. Hospital Administrator Dr. Robert Chen sat behind a conference table with 2 lawyers, their expressions suggesting the outcome had been predetermined. "Dr. Williams, we've received additional complaints about your professional conduct," Chen announced. "Patient safety concerns require immediate action." "What patient safety concerns?" Keisha demanded. "My surgical record is spotless." Anonymous. "Reports suggest substance abuse and erratic behavior. We're suspending your surgical privileges pending investigation." The fabricated charges were professionally crafted, designed to destroy Keisha's career, even if eventually disproven. Someone with legal expertise had constructed a case that would require months to resolve, during which her reputation would be demolished. Meanwhile, Zara faced harassment at school that escalated beyond administrative pressure. Guidance counselor. Mrs. Bradley filed a report with Child Protective Services claiming signs of abuse and neglect in the Williams household. "I'm required by law to report suspected abuse," Bradley told the social worker during their interview. "Zara's been exhibiting concerning behavioral changes since her alleged assault." The word alleged wasn't accidental. The school system was actively undermining Zara's credibility while painting her parents as potentially abusive. Marcus's business faced similar systematic destruction. Corporate clients received detailed packets of information claiming he was mentally unstable and possibly dangerous due to PTSD. 3 Fortune 500 companies cancelled contracts within 48 hours. "I'm sorry, Marcus," his primary contact at Delta Airlines explained privately. "We received a very convincing briefing about security concerns. Our legal department won't let us take the risk." The financial pressure was calculated to force the Williams family into bankruptcy, making it impossible to fund their legal battle or maintain their investigation. But the most disturbing development was the community's response. Neighbors who'd been friendly for years suddenly avoided eye contact. The Homeowners Association called an emergency meeting to discuss security concerns in Meadowbrook. Some residents openly suggested the Williams family should consider relocating for everyone's safety. "It's not personal," their next-door neighbor explained awkwardly, "but all this police attention is affecting property values. The isolation was psychological warfare designed to convince the family they were fighting alone against overwhelming." Odd's father Michael Okafor's St. Augustine's Church received a bomb threat during Sunday morning service, forcing evacuation of 300 parishioners. The FBI found no explosives, but the message was clear. Supporting the Williams family carried consequences. "They want us to be afraid," Father Okafor told Marcus after the evacuation. "But fear is what allowed this evil to flourish in darkness." Despite the risks, Father Okafor organized a press conference to bring national attention to the case. Marcus stood before dozens of reporters and cameras, his military bearing evident as he spoke with calm authority. My daughter was brutally assaulted by police officers for the crime of being black in the wrong neighborhood, he began. What we've discovered since then represents a systematic conspiracy to deny civil rights to American citizens. The press, conference generated national coverage, with major networks picking up the story. Civil rights organizations mobilized support, and congressional representatives began asking questions about federal oversight of local law enforcement. But publicity brought even more dangerous retaliation. Death threats arrived hourly through social media, email, and anonymous phone calls. The threats were specific, detailed, and clearly written by people with access to the family's personal information. "We know where your wife works," one message read. "We know what time Zara gets. Out of track practice. Stop this investigation or they won't make it home." Agent Park recommended immediate relocation to a federal safe house, but Marcus refused to abandon the fight when they were finally making progress. Instead, he implemented military-level security protocols. Tommy Rodriguez, despite still recovering from his attack, coordinated with other former SEAL teammates to provide round-the-clock protection. The Williams home became a fortress, with armed veterans maintaining constant surveillance. The most devastating attack came when Tommy was ambushed outside a courthouse where he'd been delivering evidence to federal prosecutors. 3 men with crowbars cornered him in a parking garage, beating him unconscious before he could draw his weapon. Tommy spent 4 days in intensive care, with a traumatic brain injury, skull fractures, and internal bleeding. But even that vicious assault backfired on the conspiracy. Security cameras captured the attack, clearly showing one attacker's police, academy-class ring, and another's distinctive white supremacist tattoo that Marcus had documented from Kowalski's social media posts. "They're getting sloppy," Agent Park observed, reviewing the footage. "Desperation makes people careless." The federal investigation expanded again when Marcus's intelligence revealed corruption in the district attorney's office. Prosecutors had been actively suppressing cases involving minority victims, ensuring that officers like Kowalski and Reeves never faced serious consequences. DA Jennifer Walsh herself had dismissed 17 cases involving police brutality against black victims over the past 2 years, claiming insufficient evidence despite overwhelming documentation. Blue, Marcus's anonymous police contact, provided recorded conversations proving that Walsh had received instructions from higher up to protect certain officers from prosecution. This isn't just police corruption, Agent Park realized. This is governmental conspiracy at multiple levels. The breakthrough came when Blue intercepted communications about a planned frame-up operation against Marcus himself. "They're going to plant drugs in your car during a traffic stop," Blue warned during an encrypted phone call. "Then claim you threatened officers with a weapon. They want you dead or in prison." "When?" "Tomorrow morning, your usual route to the FBI field office." Marcus felt a cold rage settle over him. These people had assaulted his daughter, destroyed his family's life, and threatened everyone who supported them. Now they planned to frame him for crimes he'd never committed. "Let them try," he said quietly. But Agent Park had different plans. Using Blue's intelligence, the FBI set up their own surveillance operation, documenting the frame-up attempt from beginning to end. When officers Kowalski and Reeves stopped Marcus's car the next morning, federal agents were watching from multiple angles. Cameras captured Kowalski, attempting to plant cocaine in the vehicle, while Reeves prepared to claim Marcus had threatened them with a knife. The arrests were swift and decisive. Both officers were taken into federal custody on charges of civil rights violations, conspiracy, and attempted evidence tampering. Their shocked expressions as FBI agents placed them in handcuffs suggested they'd never imagined facing real consequences for their actions. Commissioner Robert Hayes resigned within hours, claiming he'd been unaware of any misconduct by his officers. But Marcus's investigation had already documented Hayes's direct involvement in covering up multiple incidents. "This is just the beginning," Agent Park told Marcus as they watched the arrest footage. "We've got evidence connecting this conspiracy to 6 other major cities." The federal grand jury convened the following week, with Marcus providing crucial testimony about the systematic harassment and assault his family had endured. Other victims came forward as news of the arrest spread, describing similar patterns of targeting and intimidation. But even as justice seemed within reach, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were still missing the real architects of this conspiracy. Kowalski and Reeves were foot soldiers. Commissioner Hayes was middle management. Someone with real power remained hidden in the shadows, pulling strings from a position of almost untouchable authority. The answer would come from an unexpected source, in a revelation that would shock even the experienced federal investigators working the case. The FBI raid on Fulton County Police Department began at dawn on a Tuesday morning, with federal agents executing simultaneous search warrants across 3 precincts. Agent Lisa Park led the operation personally, her team seizing communications, equipment, personnel files, and financial records that had been hidden from previous investigations. What they discovered exceeded their worst expectations. "Mr. Williams, you need to see this." Agent Park called Marcus to the FBI field office that afternoon. The evidence room looked like a war crimes tribunal, with boxes of documents, hard drives, and recorded communications covering every available surface. Marcus examined the seized materials with growing amazement. Financial records showed systematic money laundering through police benevolent associations. Communication logs revealed coordination between multiple law enforcement agencies. Personnel files documented a network of officers with white supremacist connections spanning 6 states. "This isn't just corruption," Marcus said, studying an organizational chart that Agent Park's team had constructed. "This is a domestic terrorism network operating inside law enforcement." The investigation triggered formation of a federal task force that included FBI, Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, and Treasury Department financial crime specialists. Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Walsh was assigned as lead prosecutor, her experience with RICO cases making her uniquely qualified for the complex conspiracy charges. "We're looking at the largest civil rights conspiracy case in modern history," Walsh told the task force during their first briefing. "The evidence suggests systematic targeting of minority families across multiple jurisdictions." Marcus provided formal cooperation with the federal investigation, sharing intelligence his private operation had compiled over months of dangerous work. His military background and investigative skills had produced evidence that impressed even experienced federal agents. "You did work that should have taken a team of agents years to accomplish," Agent Park acknowledged. "Without your investigation, this conspiracy might have continued indefinitely." The financial crimes component proved particularly devastating to the conspiracy's leadership. Treasury investigators discovered that federal grant money, designated for community policing programs, had been diverted to fund harassment operations against minority families. Over $2 million in federal funds had been used to purchase surveillance equipment, pay overtime for targeted enforcement, and provide legal defense for officers accused of civil rights violations. "This triggers RICO prosecutions," Assistant U.S. Attorney Walsh explained. "We can treat the entire network as an organized criminal enterprise." Officers Bradley Kowalski and Danny Reeves were arrested on federal charges during a coordinated operation that prevented them from destroying additional evidence. Both men were held without bail, facing potential life sentences under federal civil rights statutes. Captain Sarah Chen's desperate attempt to destroy evidence was captured on surveillance, cameras that the FBI had secretly installed in police facilities. Her arrest came as she fed documents into an industrial shredder, unaware that federal agents were watching her destroy evidence of the conspiracy she'd helped coordinate. Commissioner Robert Hayes' resignation came too late to avoid criminal liability. Evidence showed he directly ordered cover-ups of multiple incidents involving minority victims, protected officers with known white supremacist connections, and diverted public funds to support the conspiracy's operations. "I was unaware of any systematic misconduct," Hayes claimed during his perp walk, but recorded conversations proved he'd personally approved Operation Cleanup and celebrated its success in driving undesirable elements from affluent neighborhoods. Marcus's testimony before the federal grand jury lasted 3 days, during which he detailed every aspect of the systematic harassment his family had endured. His military bearing and methodical presentation convinced grand jurors that this wasn't isolated police misconduct, but coordinated domestic terrorism. "They didn't see us as citizens deserving protection," Marcus testified. "They saw us as targets, requiring elimination." Zara's courage in providing video testimony inspired other victims to come forward. Her composed description of the assault and its aftermath, delivered with the same quiet strength that characterized her father, moved several grand jurors to tears. "I want other kids to know that they deserve justice," Zara said during her testimony. "Nobody should have to live in fear because of their skin color." Dr. Keisha Williams's hospital disciplinary hearing was cancelled within hours of the federal arrests. Hospital administrator Dr. Robert Chen issued a public apology, claiming the proceedings had been based on false information provided by unknown sources, but the damage to her reputation would take years to repair, despite her complete vindication by federal investigators. National media coverage exploded as details of the conspiracy emerged. Civil rights organizations mobilized support with protests and vigils held in cities across the country. Congressional representatives demanded hearings about federal oversight of local law enforcement. The scope of the investigation expanded when Agent Park's team discovered evidence of similar operations in Houston, Phoenix, Charlotte, Nashville, Tampa, and Detroit. Federal task forces were established in each city, with local FBI field offices receiving authority to investigate police departments suspected of civil rights violations. "This appears to be a nationwide network," Agent Park told congressional investigators during closed-door briefings. "We're looking at hundreds of officers across multiple states." Marcus's role shifted from victim to expert consultant as the federal investigation expanded. His unique combination of military intelligence experience and personal knowledge of the conspiracy made him invaluable to federal prosecutors. Tommy Rodriguez recovered from his assault and returned to assist the investigation, his attack providing crucial evidence about the conspiracy's willingness to use violence against anyone threatening their operations. Janet Murphy, the former internal affairs detective who'd first warned Marcus about police corruption, became a protected federal witness. Her testimony revealed how corruption investigations had been systematically suppressed for over a decade. "Every time we tried to investigate these officers, the cases disappeared," Murphy testified. "Evidence vanished, witnesses recanted, and investigators were transferred or demoted. The revelation that some politicians had received campaign contributions from groups connected to the conspiracy sent shockwaves through Georgia's political establishment. State Senator Patricia Blackwood, a prominent civil rights advocate, demanded immediate investigations of all elected officials who'd received funding from police benevolent associations linked to the network. Defense attorneys for the accused. Officers attempted various strategies to minimize their clients' liability. High-profile lawyer Richard Sterling, representing Officer Kowalski, tried to portray the conspiracy as a few bad apples rather than systematic criminal enterprise. But the evidence was overwhelming. Recorded conversations, financial records, and communications logs proved extensive coordination between dozens of participants across multiple agencies. "My client was following orders from superiors," Sterling argued during pre-trial motions. "He believed his actions were authorized. Law enforcement activities. Your client's social media posts show him planning attacks on minority families," Assistant U.S. Attorney Walsh responded. "That's not law enforcement, that's terrorism." Pre-trial revelations continued to shock even experienced observers. Evidence showed that the conspiracy had infiltrated federal law enforcement, with several FBI agents providing advance warning about civil rights investigations. "They had people everywhere," Agent Park explained to Marcus during one of their briefings. FBI, Treasury, even some federal prosecutors were feeding information to the conspiracy. Marcus's realization that his fight for his daughter's justice had uncovered decades of systematic oppression both thrilled and terrified him. The scope of what they'd exposed could transform civil rights enforcement nationwide, but victory remained uncertain. "We've cut off the Hydra's heads," Tommy observed during one of their strategy sessions. "But until we find the heart of this thing, it'll just grow back." Marcus knew his teammate was right. They'd arrested foot soldiers and middle management. But someone with real authority had created and protected this network for years. Someone with enough power to coordinate between federal agencies, state governments, and local law enforcement. The true architect of this conspiracy remained hidden. But Marcus's investigation had proven they existed. The systematic nature of the operations, the sophisticated legal protections, the financial resources, all of it pointed to someone operating at the highest levels of power. "We're close," Agent Park assured him. "These people got away with this for so long because nobody had the skills and determination to expose them. You changed that." As the federal investigation entered its final phase, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought his family from victims to heroes. Zara's assault had revealed a cancer growing inside American law enforcement, a network of domestic terrorists, wearing badges and carrying the authority of the state. But they'd fought back, they'd exposed the truth, and they'd ensured that other families wouldn't suffer the same injustices. Justice isn't just about punishment, Marcus told a gathering of civil rights advocates. It's about preventing future victims and rebuilding trust in our institutions. The trials were scheduled to begin in 3 months, with prosecutors confident that the evidence would result in significant convictions. Civil lawsuits seeking damages for affected families were being coordinated by prominent civil rights attorneys. Reform. Measures were being implemented across multiple police departments, with federal consent decrees mandating oversight and accountability measures that should prevent similar conspiracies from developing. But even as apparent victory approached, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that their greatest challenge lay ahead. Comment number 1. If you believe the federal investigation will successfully prosecute everyone involved in this conspiracy, or comment number 2 if you think the real masterminds will escape justice. Hit that like button if you've ever had to fight against a corrupt system, and make sure to subscribe, because the shocking revelation that's coming next will change everything you thought you knew about this case. But who was the true architect behind this massive conspiracy, and how far would they go to protect their secrets when everything started falling apart? The federal courthouse in downtown Atlanta had never seen anything like the media circus surrounding United States versus Kowalski. National news crews lined the steps, civil rights protesters filled the plaza, and security was so tight that federal marshals screened every person entering the building. Marcus Williams sat in the front row of the gallery, his military bearing evident as he watched the proceedings that would determine whether his daughter's assault would receive justice. Beside him, Zara held her mother's hand, her quiet strength inspiring everyone who saw her. The United States calls Marcus Williams to the stand, Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Walsh announced on the trial's opening day. Marcus's testimony lasted 6 hours, during which he methodically described every aspect of the conspiracy his investigation had uncovered. His military training was evident in his precise recollection of dates, times, and specific details that painted a devastating picture of systematic civil rights violations. "Mr. Williams, in your professional opinion as a former Navy SEAL, was this assault on your daughter a random act of police misconduct?" Walsh asked. "No, ma'am, this was a planned operation designed to intimidate my family and others like us. The coordination, the cover-up, the retaliation, all of it indicates extensive planning and resources." Defense attorney Richard Sterling's cross-examination attempted to portray Marcus as a vigilante seeking revenge rather than justice. But Sterling's strategy backfired when Marcus's heroic military record was introduced as evidence. "You've killed people in combat, haven't you, Mr. Williams?" Sterling asked, trying to suggest Marcus was dangerous. "I served my country with honor for 20 years, Marcus replied calmly. "I protected American values, including the right of all citizens to equal protection under law." The courtroom erupted in applause before Judge Patricia Williams could restore order. Zara's testimony on the second day proved even more powerful than her video deposition. Now 18 and preparing for Stanford University, she described the assault with clear, precise language that left several jurors visibly emotional. "Officer Kowalski slammed my face into the car and said I needed to learn my place," Zara testified. He used racial slurs while Officer Reeves pepper-sprayed me. They wanted to hurt me because of who I am, not because of anything I did. The defense's attempt to blame Zara for the assault collapsed when security footage finally surfaced. A nearby business owner, threatened into silence for months, had secretly preserved recordings that clearly showed the unprovoked nature of the attack. The footage was devastating. It showed Zara complying with every instruction, remaining calm and polite even as the officers escalated their aggression. When Kowalski struck her, the sound echoed through the silent courtroom. "That's my baby," Dr. Keisha Williams whispered, tears streaming down her face as she watched her daughter's assault replayed for the jury. Officer Danny Reeves broke under cross-examination on the third day, his composure cracking as federal. Prosecutors presented evidence of his white supremacist connections. "Mr. Reeves, did you post on social media about teaching lessons to minorities who forgot their place?" Walsh asked. Those posts were taken out of context." "Context?" "You wrote, and I quote, 'Time to remind these people who really runs things.' This was posted 2 days before you assaulted Miss Williams." Reeves's attempt to claim his online activity was just joking fell apart when prosecutors introduced recordings of planning sessions where he and Kowalski discussed targeting successful black families. The revelation that the conspiracy included federal law enforcement shocked even experienced court observers. FBI agent Michael Torres, who'd been providing advance warning about civil rights investigations, was led into the courtroom in handcuffs. "Agent Torres, did you receive payments from police benevolent associations connected to this conspiracy?" Walsh asked during his testimony. "I was conducting authorized intelligence gathering," Torres claimed weakly. "Authorized by whom?" "Your supervisor testified that you were acting without authority when you leaked information about federal investigations." Financial records showed Torres had received over $50,000 in consulting fees from organizations linked to the conspiracy, payments that coincided with the suppression of multiple civil rights cases. Captain Sarah Chen's plea deal testimony provided the most damaging evidence against the conspiracy's leadership. Her detailed description of how the network operated shocked federal investigators who'd thought they understood the scope of the criminal enterprise. "Commissioner Hayes personally approved Operation Cleanup," Chen testified. He said successful black families in white neighborhoods were a threat to property values and social stability. The conspiracy's sophisticated legal protections became clear as Chen described how evidence was routinely destroyed, witnesses intimidated, and federal investigations undermined. "We had procedures for handling problematic cases," she explained. "Evidence would disappear, witness statements would be altered, and federal agents would receive advance warning about investigations." Defense attempts to portray the conspiracy as a few rogue officers collapsed under the weight of evidence showing systematic coordination across multiple agencies. Communications logs revealed hundreds of participants across 6 states, all working to suppress civil rights and protect violent officers. Commissioner Robert Hayes' testimony proved particularly damaging to his own defense. His attempt to claim ignorance was shredded by recorded conversations where he personally directed cover-up operations. "Commissioner Hayes, is this your voice saying, 'Make sure that Williams' family learns to keep their mouths shut'?" Walsh played a recording from Hayes' office. "That conversation was taken out of context," Hayes replied weakly. "The context was discussing how to intimidate a family whose daughter had been brutally assaulted by your officers." Expert testimony from Dr. Amanda Foster, a police psychology specialist, explained how white supremacist ideology had infiltrated law enforcement agencies nationwide. "This conspiracy represents the weaponization of police authority against minority communities," Dr. Foster testified. "It's domestic terrorism conducted under color of law." The defense's closing arguments focused on portraying individual defendants as products of their environment rather than criminal conspirators, but the evidence was overwhelming. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, these defendants didn't make mistakes," Walsh argued in her closing statement. "They implemented a systematic plan to deny civil rights to American citizens. They turned law enforcement into a weapon of oppression, Defense attorney Sterling's weak closing focused on institutional failures rather than criminal intent, but his arguments rang hollow against months of evidence showing deliberate planning and coordination. The jury deliberated for 3 days, carefully reviewing the massive amount of evidence presented during the 6-week trial. Their questions to the judge suggested they were taking their responsibility seriously, requesting clarification about RICO statutes and civil rights law. When they returned with their verdict, the courtroom was packed beyond capacity. Civil rights. Leaders, federal officials, and media representatives filled every available seat. On the charge of conspiracy to violate civil rights, how do you find the defendant Bradley Kowalski? Guilty. The word echoed through the courthouse as victims, and their families erupted in celebration. Similar guilty verdicts followed for Officer Danny Reeves, Captain Sarah Chen, and Commissioner Robert Hayes. Federal agent Michael Torres received additional convictions for obstruction of justice and accepting bribes, while other co-conspirators faced various charges related to their roles in the network. Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders as justice was finally delivered. But even in victory, he knew this was just the beginning of a longer fight for systemic reform. The sentencing hearing took place 6 weeks later, in the same federal courthouse where justice had finally been served. Victim impact statements from Marcus, Zara, and other affected families provided powerful testimony about the conspiracy's devastating effects on their lives. "Your Honor, these defendants didn't just assault my daughter," Marcus said, addressing Judge Patricia Williams directly. "They attacked the fundamental principle that all Americans deserve equal protection under law." Zara's impact statement, delivered with the same quiet strength that had characterized her throughout the ordeal, brought many spectators to tears. "I want other young people to know that justice is possible," she said. "What happened to me was wrong, but speaking truth to power can make a difference." Judge Williams's sentencing remarks reflected her understanding of the case's broader significance. "This conspiracy represents one of the most serious violations of civil rights this court has ever encountered," she said, before announcing the sentences. Officer Bradley Kowalski received 25 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. His white supremacist ideology and leadership role in planning attacks on minority families earned him the harshest sentence. Officer Danny Reeves received 15 years after his cooperation with prosecutors, though Judge Williams noted that his assistance couldn't fully offset the severity of his crimes. Captain Sarah Chen's 12-year sentence reflected her administrative role in covering up the conspiracy, while Commissioner Robert Hayes received 10 years for his leadership in directing the criminal enterprise. Federal agent Michael Torres faced 8 years for corruption and obstruction of justice, his law enforcement oath making his betrayal particularly egregious. The civil lawsuit settlements provided financial compensation for affected families, with the Williams family receiving $4.5 million in damages. Marcus immediately announced plans to donate a significant portion to civil rights organizations and victim advocacy groups. "Money can't undo what happened to my daughter," he said at a press conference following the settlement, "but it can help prevent other families from suffering similar injustices." The Fulton County Police Department entered into a federal consent decree mandating comprehensive reforms under Department of Justice oversight. New policies required body cameras for all officers, civilian oversight of internal affairs investigations, and mandatory training on implicit bias and constitutional rights. Marcus's appointment to the Citizen Oversight Board monitoring police. Reforms provided him with an official role in ensuring meaningful change. His military background and investigation experience made him uniquely qualified to evaluate compliance with the consent decree. "Reform isn't just about new policies," Marcus explained during his first board meeting. "It's about changing culture and rebuilding community trust." Zara's recovery continued as she prepared for Stanford University, where she planned to study criminal justice and civil rights law. Her experience had transformed her from victim to advocate, inspiring her to dedicate her life to fighting systematic injustice. "I want to become a federal prosecutor," she told a gathering of high school students. "What happened to me showed me how important it is to have people in the system who actually care about justice." Dr. Keisha Williams returned to her surgical practice with her reputation fully restored, the hospital formally apologizing for their treatment during the conspiracy's harassment campaign. She was promoted to Chief of Pediatric Trauma Surgery in recognition of her courage under pressure. The national impact extended far beyond Atlanta as federal task forces investigated similar conspiracies in Houston, Phoenix, Charlotte, Nashville, Tampa, and Detroit. The Williams case had provided a roadmap for exposing systematic civil rights violations hidden within law enforcement agencies. Marcus's book about the experience, titled Fighting for Zara, A Father's Battle Against Institutional Racism, became a national bestseller. Proceeds funded the Williams Family Foundation, which provided legal support for police brutality victims nationwide. Tommy Rodriguez and Marcus formed a security consulting company specializing in protecting civil rights activists and investigating corruption within law enforcement. Their military skills and understanding of police tactics made them uniquely effective at exposing misconduct. Father Michael Okafor's St. Augustine's Church became a center for community organizing and civil rights advocacy, hosting regular forums on police accountability and racial justice. The bomb threat that had targeted the church was eventually traced to conspiracy members, adding terrorism charges to their convictions. Agent Lisa Park's work on the case earned her promotion to head the FBI's Civil Rights Division, where she implemented new protocols for investigating systematic police misconduct. Her experience with the Williams case informed federal policy on addressing organized civil rights violations. The annual commemoration of Zara's assault became a National Civil Rights Awareness Day, with events held in cities across the country. The date marked not just remembrance of injustice, but celebration of the courage required to fight systematic oppression. Documentary filmmakers chronicled the case for national television, with the resulting film winning multiple awards and inspiring legislative reforms at the federal level. Congress passed new laws strengthening oversight of local law enforcement and providing additional resources for civil rights investigations. Marcus's speaking engagements at police academies, law schools, and community organizations spread awareness about the importance of accountability in law enforcement. His message emphasized that good officers had an obligation to report and stop misconduct by their colleagues. Silence in the face of injustice makes you complicit, he told recruits at the Georgia Police Academy. The badge is supposed to protect all citizens, not just those who look like you. The conspiracy's financial network was completely dismantled, with over $3 million in illegally diverted federal funds recovered and returned to community policing programs. New oversight measures prevented similar misuse of federal resources. State Senator Patricia Blackwood, who had demanded investigations of political connections to the conspiracy, successfully passed legislation requiring disclosure of all law enforcement, political contributions, and lobbying activities. 1 year after the trial verdicts, the Williams family gathered for a quiet dinner in their Meadowbrook home. The house that had been under siege during the investigation was now peaceful, again though security measures remained in place. "I'm proud of what we accomplished," Marcus said as they reflected on their journey. "We turned our family's trauma into meaningful change." Zara, now confident and poised as she prepared for college, had grown from the experience in ways that amazed her parents. "I know why this happened to us," she said thoughtfully. "We were in a position to fight back. A lot of families don't have those resources or connections." The conversation was interrupted by Marcus's phone, an encrypted device he used for sensitive communications. The caller ID showed Blue, his anonymous police contact, who had provided crucial intelligence during the investigation. "We need to meet," Blue said without preamble. "There's something you need to know about the real architect of this conspiracy." Marcus felt his blood run cold. They'd thought the case was closed, justice served, reforms implemented. But Blue's tone suggested their victory was incomplete. "What do you mean, the real architect? Everyone you arrested was middle management. The person who created and protected this network for decades is still out there. And now they're planning something that could destroy everything you've accomplished." The celebration ended abruptly, as Marcus realized their fight for justice was far from over. 1 year after Marcus Williams stood bloodied on courthouse steps, He received the phone call that would change everything. He thought he knew about his family's ordeal. Agent Lisa Park's voice was tight with urgency when she contacted him for an emergency meeting at a secure location outside Atlanta. The FBI safe house was located in an abandoned industrial complex, far from any surveillance that might compromise their conversation. "Mr. Williams, we've discovered something that changes the entire context of your case," Agent Park began, her expression grave. "What happened to your family wasn't random, and it wasn't even about maintaining neighborhood demographics." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "What do you mean?" "We've been tracking financial transactions from the conspiracy, following money trails. That led us to offshore accounts and shell corporations. What we found suggests your family was specifically targeted for elimination." Agent Park spread photographs across the table, showing surveillance images of Marcus and his family taken months before Zara's assault. The photos showed detailed documentation of their daily routines, work schedules, and security measures. "Someone had been watching you for almost a year before the traffic stop," she continued. "This wasn't about keeping black families out of white neighborhoods. This was about neutralizing a specific threat." "What threat?" "I'm a security consultant. I protect corporate executives from kidnapping and industrial espionage." "That's exactly the problem." Agent Park produced a thick file containing Marcus's military service record, his current business relationships, and detailed analyses of his investigative capabilities. "You're not just any retired SEAL, Mr. Williams. You're an expert in exposing corruption, investigating financial crimes, and uncovering conspiracy networks. Your skills make you uniquely dangerous to certain people." The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. His daughter hadn't been assaulted because she was black in the wrong place. She'd been targeted because her father posed a threat to something, a much larger than a local police corruption network. "Who?" Marcus asked quietly. "Internal Affairs investigator William Cross." The name meant nothing to Marcus, but Agent Park's next words made everything clear. "Cross has been running a nationwide network of corrupt law enforcement officers for over 15 years. He identifies threats to his operation and eliminates them through systematic harassment, violence, and legal persecution." Agent Park explained that Cross had identified Marcus months before Zara's assault, recognizing that his military intelligence background and security consulting work made him capable of exposing the kind of systematic corruption Cross had spent decades building. "The assault on Zara was designed to test your response and provide justification for destroying your family if you fought back," she continued. "Cross expected you to either stay quiet or make mistakes that would allow him to frame you for crimes." Marcus felt rage building as he realized the true scope of what had been done to his family. "My daughter was tortured to test my reaction? Cross needed to know how dangerous you were. The fact that you uncovered his entire operation confirmed his worst fears about your capabilities. Evidence showed that Cross had orchestrated attacks on successful black families nationwide, but not for racial reasons. He'd been eliminating potential threats to his criminal network by targeting anyone with the skills, resources, or connections necessary to expose systematic corruption. Cross identified military veterans, federal law enforcement families, journalists, and civil rights attorneys," Agent Park explained. "Anyone who might notice patterns or have the ability to investigate was systematically targeted. The financial evidence was staggering. Cross's network had stolen over $50 million in federal funds over 15 years, using the money to fund operations across 12 states, private prison corporations, white supremacist organizations, and corrupt politicians had all provided funding in exchange for services. Cross wasn't motivated by racism," Agent Park continued. "He was motivated by profit. The racial targeting was just a convenient cover story that discouraged investigation. Marcus's investigation had inadvertently uncovered the largest civil rights conspiracy in modern history. But it was actually a front for something even more sinister, a nationwide criminal enterprise that used systematic oppression to protect massive financial crimes." "Where is Cross now?" Marcus asked. "That's the problem. He's been tipped off by a corrupt federal agent we haven't identified yet. Cross knows we're closing in, and our intelligence suggests he's planning to eliminate you and your family before fleeing the country." Agent Park revealed that Cross had access to federal law enforcement databases, encrypted communications, and enough corrupt contacts to coordinate a sophisticated assassination operation. "He can't allow you to testify about what you've discovered," she explained. "Your knowledge threatens not just his freedom, but the entire criminal network he's built." The scope of Cross's operation was breathtaking. Evidence suggested he'd been responsible for suppressing civil rights investigations, protecting violent officers, and eliminating threats for over a decade. Hundreds of families had been destroyed to protect his criminal enterprise. Cross planned to use your investigation to identify other threats to his network, Agent Park said. He allowed the lower-level convictions because they helped him locate people who might expose the real operation. Marcus realized that his apparent victory had actually been part of Cross's strategy. By allowing Kowalski, Reeves, and other foot soldiers to be convicted, Cross had identified everyone involved in exposing his network while maintaining his own cover. "He's been planning this endgame for months," Agent Park continued. "Evidence suggests he intends to frame you for domestic terrorism, then eliminate your family during the arrest operation." The plan was sophisticated and had federal backing from corrupt agents within multiple agencies. Cross had spent years placing allies in positions where they could protect his operations and eliminate threats. "We're planning a raid on Cross's compound, but he's been tipped off. Our only chance is to draw him out by making him think you're vulnerable." Marcus's military training took over as he processed the tactical situation. Cross had superior resources, federal authority, and enough corrupt contacts to make a direct confrontation extremely dangerous. "What do you need me to do?" "We need you to appear at the federal courthouse tomorrow for what Cross believes will be a routine witness interview. He's planning to eliminate you there, but we'll be ready." The operation required Marcus to walk into an obvious trap while federal agents attempted to capture Cross and his team. The margin for error was minimal, and failure would mean death for Marcus and his family. But as Marcus considered the proposal, he realized this had always been inevitable. From the moment Zara was assaulted, this confrontation had been building toward a final showdown between justice and corruption. "My family? In protective custody. They'll be safe regardless of what happens tomorrow." Marcus spent his final evening at home reviewing the evidence that had consumed his life for over a year. The basement command center where he'd planned his investigation now seemed quaint compared to the scope of what they'd actually been fighting. Cross's network had operated with impunity for 15 years, destroying lives and suppressing justice, while stealing millions of dollars in federal funds. The corruption extended into the highest levels of federal law enforcement, state government, and private industry. But Marcus's investigation had exposed it all. His refusal to accept injustice had uncovered the largest criminal conspiracy in modern American history. Tomorrow, that fight would reach its conclusion. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the federal courthouse wearing the same determined expression he'd worn as a Navy SEAL preparing for combat. Federal agents were positioned throughout the building, but Cross had federal authority and could potentially override their security measures. The confrontation came in the courthouse parking garage as Marcus walked toward the elevator. Cross appeared with 2 armed operatives, his calm demeanor suggesting supreme confidence in his ability to eliminate this final threat. "Mr. Williams," Cross said, his voice professionally polite, "I think it's time we had a conversation." Marcus recognized the tactical situation immediately. Cross intended to kill him in the garage, then claim Marcus had attacked federal agents. The cover story was already prepared, and Cross had enough corrupt contacts to make it stick. But Marcus had prepared for this moment. "Actually, I think we're done talking," Marcus replied, activating a concealed recording device that was broadcasting live to FBI command center. The gunfight lasted less than 2 minutes. Marcus's SEAL training proved superior to Cross's operatives, but the real victory came when federal agents arrested Cross as he attempted to detonate explosives planted throughout the courthouse. "You've destroyed everything," Cross snarled as Agent Park placed him in handcuffs. 15 years of work, billions in revenue, hundreds of careers. "Good," Marcus replied simply. Cross's confession, given in hopes of avoiding the death penalty, revealed the full scope of his criminal network. Over 800 law enforcement officers across 23 states had been involved in systematic oppression designed to protect massive financial crimes. The investigation expanded internationally as evidence revealed connections to human trafficking, drug smuggling, and arms dealing. Cross had used his position to protect criminal enterprises worth billions of dollars. Marcus stood on the courthouse steps one final time. Federal agents surrounding him as reporters captured his statement about the case's resolution. "They thought breaking my daughter would break me," he said. The blood on his knuckles now explained as evidence of his fight to save lives. They were wrong. Behind him, the courthouse showed scorch marks from Cross's failed bombing attempt. Smoke from destroyed evidence drifted across downtown Atlanta as federal agents worked to preserve what remained of Cross's criminal records. "This fight started with one family seeking justice for their daughter," Marcus continued. "It ended with exposing the largest criminal conspiracy in American history." Cross received multiple life sentences without possibility of parole, while his network faced RICO prosecutions that would take years to complete. Reform measures were implemented across federal law enforcement, and the Williams case became a mandatory study in police academies nationwide. Zara graduated from Stanford with degrees in criminal justice and constitutional law, eventually becoming the youngest federal prosecutor in Georgia history. Her experience had transformed her from victim to champion of justice for others who couldn't fight for themselves. The true victory wasn't just the convictions or the reforms, it was proving that ordinary citizens could expose systematic corruption and demand accountability from the most powerful institutions in society. Marcus's final words to the gathered media captured the broader significance of their struggle. Justice isn't guaranteed. It's earned by people willing to fight for it, no matter the cost. Comment number 1 if you believe citizens have a responsibility to expose corruption, even when it's dangerous, or comment number 2 if you think people should trust institutions to police themselves. Hit that like button if this story inspired you to believe that one family can make a difference against overwhelming odds, and subscribe because tomorrow we're covering another incredible story of ordinary people fighting extraordinary injustice. What other systematic conspiracies might be hidden in plain sight, and which of us will have the courage to expose them when the time comes? Marcus Williams's journey teaches us that justice isn't a privilege automatically granted to citizens, but a right we must actively defend. When institutions fail to protect the innocent, ordinary people possess the power to expose corruption and demand accountability, regardless of how powerful their adversaries may be. The story demonstrates that systematic oppression often disguises itself as isolated incidents. What appeared to be random police brutality was actually part of a carefully orchestrated criminal conspiracy, spanning decades. This reminds us to look beyond surface explanations and investigate patterns that reveal deeper truths. Courage multiplies when people stand together. Marcus's victory wasn't achieved alone, but through collaboration with allies who risked their own safety to support justice. Tommy Rodriguez, Agent Park, Father Okafor, and countless others proved that solidarity can overcome even the most sophisticated corruption networks. Perhaps most importantly, this case shows that protecting our children requires more than providing them with opportunities and education. It demands actively fighting for a society where their rights and dignity are respected, regardless of their race or background. The Williams family's transformation from victims to advocates illustrates how personal trauma can become a catalyst for systematic change. Their refusal to accept injustice not only secured justice for Zara, but protected countless other families from similar attacks. When good people remain silent, evil flourishes. When they speak truth to power, even the most entrenched corruption can be exposed and defeated. What would you have done in Marcus's position? Would you have trusted the system to deliver justice, or would you have launched your own investigation like he did? Drop a comment below and let us know your thoughts. If this story opened your eyes to how systematic corruption can hide behind individual incidents, smash that like button to help us reach more people who need to hear these important truths. Share this video with friends and family members who believe in fighting for justice, because everyone deserves to know that ordinary citizens can make extraordinary differences when they refuse to accept injustice. Subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss our stories about real people standing up against corruption and oppression. Tomorrow we're bringing you another incredible account of courage in the face of overwhelming odds. Thank you for taking this journey with the Williams family and for believing that truth and justice can prevail against even the most powerful conspiracies. Your support helps us continue sharing these vital stories. Stay strong, stay vigilant, and remember that your voice matters in the fight for equality and justice. Together, we can expose corruption and build a better world for our children.